Can you hear me now, Eldad?
Hey, yeah, you're here.
I had some technical problems with my headphones. I've gone old school without headphones now. So you probably couldn't hear me earlier. And today's show is about winning with data and never losing control. And we have Eldad on the show today. Eldad, I've been known for a long time and always enjoy our chats. So welcome to the show. For people that don't know you, just like to give yourself an introduction.
Sure, Chris. Thanks for having me first on the show. It's my second time. It's been a great experience the first time. And yeah, we've been chatting about these stuff for so long, so it feels like supernatural. But yeah, hi everyone. I'm Eldad Chai. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Satori Cyber. We're a data security platform to help companies secure their data platforms in the cloud and on-prem. Just a bit about myself. I live in Sunnyvale in California. My background for many years was cybersecurity, both application and data security. And at some point, about 5-6 years ago, as working with a lot of security leaders, we've experienced firsthand the explosion of data and how challenging it has become to achieve both the business needs for data, more data, more people, more analytics, more AI, and the security aspects of data. How do you actually make sure your data doesn't get stolen? And we open Satori to help companies do that. We've been pretty successful so far and happy with our journey. So yeah, happy to be here, Chris, and looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah, thank you. And I've seen Satori from the early days and always loved what you've been working on and what you do and help with your clients and our clients as well. And I like the strapline, and I took the strapline from your LinkedIn one of winning with data and never losing control. And I think that's a really good way of framing the outcome or the benefits of working with a product like yourself is that the time to market and getting data out to the business to use it is normally not an easy journey because of the challenges of making sure it's secure and that can prevent getting that competitive advantage and, using that term, winning with data. So how have you seen the recent changes now with Lakehouse architecture, the rise of Iceberg, Delta table formats? How is that adding more complexity now to the security of our data platforms?
Yeah, so great question. I think we're on a journey, right? We're at a much better place today than we were, 2 or 3 years ago. And I think, just to start off with this, there's still more to do. We're still in the journey. That's the beauty of this field we're in, which is, it's early, it's nascent, there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. AI is just shuffling the cards again, but it's interesting and it's impactful for the companies we serve. So that's amazing. So just on your question, going to the technical domain of all, I think this year was a really important year in terms of announcements and product development. I've been there at the Snowflake Summit, at Databricks events. We've seen Microsoft releasing stuff. We're seeing AWS now finally making a lot of moves in this area. I think this year is actually like a pivotal moment in data architectures. And I think that the idea is, if what really changed, and I know I think Microsoft really led the pack there, is moving from thinking about a data architecture as a sum of a lot of different disparate architectures to one thing. And I think the data lake is really the core of that. So this ability to have your data lake as the centerpiece, where you start, where you put the data, and the ability to build all your use case on top of that. It's a really hard thing to do, because how do you move the data? How do you address latency requirements? How do you make sure it's efficient? How do you make sure you control costs? But once that has been figured out, then Microsoft with Fabric was the first, and then Snowflake with Iceberg and Databricks, and that has been phenomenal. What that creates in the market, it's not just security, it's many other domains. It really abstracts a lot of the services you would otherwise consume ad hoc per a specific data architecture as part of the platform. So when you have like this kind of architecture, you want to have security across other use cases. You want to be able to not just solve security for a specific use case in Snowflake, but there's other database I'm using now. There's other use cases, there are other tools, and that's really interesting for security, because that's where security really shines, when you're not chasing your own tail in terms of, oh, there's a new engineering project, how do you secure it? But hey, I can now put in place one element into my architecture that can secure all your use cases. And that's kind of been our vision from day one. We're actually, like, for example, for Fabric, the first security partner for Fabric, and provide like that security layer across all the use cases. So interesting times in general. I think we're there's still more to do, but we're in a much better place in terms of security for your data architecture than we were like a year or 2 years ago. And like we're really, really happy from a Satori perspective, because that's kind of where we saw it going, and that's how we built our architecture to support.
Yeah, and I think I just made a note there about security being bundled with the platform. So I've seen it in the past, and we had platform consolidation. So we're putting everything onto that same platform. So having security on the platform was good enough then. But now with moving from data lake to lake houses, and having the data spanning both of those locations, meant that some of the options for doing security historically, within the platform, have now got to be rethought, because you've either got to apply the same security logic onto another data set or another compute engine, unless you're going with an approach similar to how you work. It's a security layer that spans across them. So I've called it bundled security. So when I think like semantic layer has been bundled with a BI product, you got security bundled with your data platform. The challenge with that, though, is the complexity of making sure that you've got that security the same across every single location. So how do you deal with that? I know myself, but for the audience, how do you deal with that challenge?
Yeah, so that's a great question. It is a very tricky problem to solve, and we're kind of focused on two things there. If you want to really have security across your entire data platforms, there's two really big stones you need to kind of overcome there. One is just technical integration. As simple as it sounds, it's very complex. SQL Server is one thing, Snowflake is another thing, Postgres, you have vector databases, you have LLMs, you have like data all over the place. How do you actually have a solution that integrates with all of these? So that's one problem you have to solve. Otherwise, it doesn't really matter. Number two is from a policy definition and policy operations perspective. How do you deal with the fact that these are tables, these are files, this is financial data, this is data that's pulled into dashboard, like this, all these use cases, ways you store data, ways you consume data. How do you set a policy that can apply to all of them? If your policy definition talks about a column, how do you apply that to a vector database, or how do you apply that to a file? So just the policy definition is another thing you need to think about if you want to apply, because otherwise you're just creating gazillion policies. So, and those are exactly the technical challenges we set to address from pretty much from day one. And I'm happy to go into further details, but just in high level, not to bore the audience. The way we solve the first one is really interesting. So we divide the world into two. One type of data sources are data sources that are more modern, they're rich in features, they have very good controls. It's really hard to operate them. Like, Snowflake, for example, has an amazing roles, permissions, setup that you can get really granular. It's another thing to configure it. It's a lot of time and effort, and it blows up, but they have the tools. So that's one type of data stores. Another type of data sources are, maybe legacy, maybe the vendor hasn't invested too much, or it's really, really hard to get the like if you want to, for example, apply roles and permissions or masking, it's pretty much impossible to do that in a reasonable way. We address both of these. One, with native integrations, we orchestrate all the internal capabilities, and for others, we built a really unique type of solution, which is like a transparent middle layer, that like a proxy that sits between the user and the database, which really takes over all the responsibility for applying security control. So you can take like a plain vanilla Postgres and putting some kind of BI tool on top of that. That Postgres has no security features, nothing is enabled, nothing is configured. And with Satori, without changing the interface with the database, you get all these security features as if Postgres was now added like a big dump of code doing all these security features. So that way, proxy for those that don't have the features and orchestration for those that do have, you have now a uniform like API to apply control to any data source. So that's one thing we solved. That's already solved. We did that pretty much from day one. The other part is the policy definition, and that is tricky again, because not just every technology has its own thing. Companies use technologies in different ways, and that's where we actually borrowed the idea of data products from a different domain as a way to abstract. And when you define a policy on Satori, you don't define a policy on a table or on a column, or even in many cases for a specific user. You apply a policy on a data product, and basically you don't need to now deal with the complexities of technical implementation. I'll give you an example. One of the things we do, one of the policies that companies usually have is policies around PII, personal information. You have all sorts of regulations around that, and then that PII is in that column, the other column, and companies just lose their heads in trying to figure out which column it is, and then configure policies for each one of these columns. What we did for that, for example, in that case, we said, forget about the columns. Satori takes responsibility over finding the PII wherever it is in real time. There's a new table, there's a new data set. We'll make sure. The only thing you need to tell us as a customer is you want PII mask. That's it. We're taking responsibility and abstracting that part, that technical complexity for you. So from a data product perspective, you're saying, okay, this is the data product. The analyst team can access that data product, but PII is going to be masked. Now, Satori, please figure out where the PII is, make sure it's masked. But from a policy, I'm done. It's one policy for everything. So the technical diversity and getting the policies to a place that they are closer to the business requirements than the technical implementation are two key elements. That's what we solved, and that's what allows our customers to really solve very broad, complex use cases across a lot of users and data sets, and apply security effectively.
So knowing from my Snowflake line, so tagging obviously can help identify, and I've also seen when Snowflake can identify what it thinks is PII, and it's not always accurate. So do you use tagging to identify that, or are you using your own method to identify what's PII and what's not?
Yeah, so again, the same concept holds. So if you already have tagged your data, even if it's in like a data catalog, we would consume that and we will build a policy on that. If you don't, and even if companies have some, maybe they have tagging on Snowflake, maybe they have solver data sets tagged in Calibra, they don't have tagging for the rest of the stuff. Again, you want to have one place to apply the policy. That's where we would employ our tagging. Usually it's like a two-sided integration, meaning like we would obtain tags from the platforms you have tagged yourself, but also push our tags into these platforms. So the whole idea, again, is one data platform that works together versus a sum of ad hoc solutions that you need now to integrate.
So I love the fact you're embracing the data product approach, and I like that approach of talking about a collection of objects that solve a business problem, and normally the business will see that as a capability or an application within their business. So having that that product-based approach where you point a product and giving it the requirements of what that sort of product will contain, and have personas that are linked to that, because you could have the same persona that's crossing many products. So once you've got persona defined once, you can map that onto other products. So data mesh has been it's not the favorite term nowadays. Everyone's always going for data products, but I think what data mesh did really instill or create the movement towards having a security built into your data sets that can be subscribed to by products. So how do you define, or how are you defining, so where the persona is stored? So is that within a separate security or IAM layer or something, information access management?
Yeah, so the data is part of the story. The other part is really the users. So there's a couple of interesting things here as well. This is where our security background comes in. So yeah, I mean the users, our customers have they have them already defined. You don't need to redefine them with Satori. We would fetch them from your Active Directory, whatever you're using, and leverage the same attributes so you can build policies. But there's something interesting about users. This is where when I said earlier, there's still more to do. So that's this area where there's still more to do with companies. But we're starting to see the change with actually very interesting with a lot of our financial customers. So typically when companies look at access controls, they think about RBAC, role-based access controls, maybe if they're very advanced, ABAC, attribute-based. But generally, you're talking about eventually like a huge list of things that can access things under certain criteria. So I have a list of users, and I'm trying to map them to all the data products or data assets. And if you think about it, it's really an attempt to predict all the data needs for people in an organization, try to define them in a huge spreadsheet, and then push them into a system, which sounds great on paper. In reality, we all know that once you've done that, 5 minutes later, there's a new employee, there's a new team. You did some, you cut some corner. You said, okay, my analyst in the UK, analyst in the US, they're the same. It's given the same permission, but really the analyst in the US is different, and they need other stuff. So it breaks really easily, and it creates a lot of overhead. So when you think about the user part of access, one of the things we did is we actually took that out of the equation as well. What we said in the data product concept is the following: don't try to predict what every user in an organization is going to need access to, because that's going to change. It's going to end up being very inaccurate. Instead, take the data owner, define what it takes for someone to gain access to this data product. So say, hey, if you want access to this data product, you need to be maybe part of these teams and need to get your manager approval. And only if you get your manager approval, you get access for a week, and the PII is going to be masked. If you want to get the PII unmasked, you need to go to their manager. Anyway, there's like a business logic there that you can define. You're not talking about a specific person. You're not talking about, hey, this, John can access or Chris can access. You're just saying this is what you need to do to gain access. And now you put that up and people can opt in dynamically. So, from the entire organization, maybe only 3 people need access to the data set in reality, not in theory, not maybe, but actually need to work with it. And those are the people that are going to go through the workflow. So it's like just-in-time access. These are concepts from our security background, very common in network access, very common in application access and other types of assets. They're just not in data yet, but still more to do. But really, that is a big benefit for companies, because the whole user aspect is you're taking that out of the equation. It reduces the complexity from, again, gazillion policies to really a few, and they're very static. The way you get access to a data set or a data product rarely changes.
So something I've seen, and I think this would address that, is role proliferation. So you set up an account in Snowflake or an alternative, but you set it up in a way that's granular enough for the worst case scenarios. But because of that, when you start rolling this out, you get role proliferation, and you have so many roles. It becomes really hard for anyone to actually work out who has access to what and who should have access to what. So yeah, solving that problem is something that will be very beneficial to many people out there that are suffering from tens of thousands of roles and not actually understanding who should be allocated to what. And that old scenario of, I need the same access as Joe or Bob, and then you just go and copy the profile across, and
it just loses its purpose at some point. The data engineers hate it, and then you put up a role and you think you're done with it, and then you get a call from an engineer and analyst say, hey, I'm trying to pull up this dashboard, I'm missing a permission, so you add a permission, and then you merge the roles, and you say, just leave me alone, I'm just going to give you everything in the schema, and that's how it ends. And from a data perspective, it's easier maybe, but that's really bad for companies, because if typically how I know this is not a security talk, but just to give people some sense of how it really happens in real life, because I've seen it in real life, is an identity is compromised. They click on a link, they follow an email, someone steals their password, and now that that hacker has access to whatever they have access to. So if it's just one table somewhere that you need access because you're working on a project this week, that's a certain amount of risk, and you can actually identify if that becomes anomalous. But if you have no access to the entire Snowflake database, then the company's in trouble. And I moved to the US about 2 years ago, where appropriate disclosure of data breaches is pretty much a law and a requirement. I get like one every week from companies that I've never heard of, that apparently someone stole an employee's identity and they got the entire database of hundreds of millions of users. So it is happening. It is scary.
Yeah, and I think just note I made there is data engineers have enough to do, all right? And
exactly.
We will keep piling on the responsibilities and complexity of dealing with this, and also the ownership of that. And it's the data engineers, they're just there to build a pipeline based on this, to create that pipeline to support the use case. And they're normally separated from the business requirements to some degree, and not actually privy to the security models that are required. And for them to try and bake that in at the time they're building the pipeline, as well as being able to do their job, it's an overhead that is a costly overhead. Data engineers aren't cheap, and you're not getting your best bang for your buck out of them if they're having to deal with these complexities that can be taken away from them. I think the other thing I'd vote is just in time. I like that. I like that term. I think just enough is the extension of that. Okay, give it just in time, just enough. I think that least privilege approach. Start with least, and then ask why you need it. Ask why you need to go and see these things in clear, and big justification for it, no problem. But I think starting with having everything, you're never going to be able to lock it down afterwards or take it away from someone. So I think that's.
So I'll give you an example, which is it on just in time, but also talks about this separation of responsibility. Like, who's the right person to? The fact that we don't have the tools, or the tools are limited, doesn't make it the process we're following. Okay, so one of our customers, it's actually a very large SaaS company in the sales tool space. They have completely different. I know, we're talking about analytics and BI. This is a production environment. They're managing the SaaS application. When something happens in production, you have to go in and solve it. So there's databases, there's customer data. Typically, since that company is they're regulated, they're selling to large enterprises, they need to follow a process. So like there's a pager duty in the middle of the night. You need to call the manager. You need to get approval. Everything has to be audited. Someone needs to open the permission. It can't be you. It can't be your manager. It has to be someone else. And then someone else needs to remove the permissions, which nobody does and forgets. That's a big headache. Versus with just in time, it's amazing. You're saying, okay, if you have a ticket number, which is recorded in our whatever ticketing platform, ServiceNow, and you're an engineer, you can get self-service access for 15 minutes to solve your problem. Just provide the ticket number. Nobody needs to approve, because we know they'll approve it, and nobody needs to wake up and open the permissions because you have Satori. That's such an amazing experience for the people that are actually doing the job. data engineer doesn't have to wake up in the middle of the night and go and update the permission table. The manager, we need to wake up. The engineer can do their job effectively. So it's really a win for everyone. You just need the right technology platform to enable that.
So a break glass approach. So having a controlled break glass approach of and I've been in this industry a while, and I've had production access before. I don't want production access sometimes, but yeah, you have to have it. But to have those additional security on top of that, I mean, okay, look, I can get access when I need it. I don't have to have it all the time. It helps with that security thing, because if they had a breach and got my access, they're not going to have access to everything. They'd have to, well, hopefully never happen, but you'd prevent that before, or report it before it got that bad. But the blast radius, I like to say, you've minimized that blast radius effect, and and that's really good when you're talking to compliance. So another note I made was security audit. So I've been there before. Someone comes in, they want to do an audit. It's a really long activity, and you're stopping everything else that's going to be beneficial for the company to answer these questions and evidence that you are compliant, and that's a big challenge. So how do you help with those compliance audit activities?
Yeah, I think so. I encourage every data engineer not to accept reality around audits as it's not okay that it's going to take you 2 weeks to complete an audit. That's not okay. You shouldn't agree to that. Not saying you shouldn't do it. The company has to do it. But if you don't have the tools to complete it within a day versus 2 weeks, then you should go and demand getting those tools. And I just I had a discussion the other day with one of our customers that said they were usually last to complete the audit, and now, like in the last audit after they got Satori, they were first. And I was so happy to do that, because sometimes it's something you overlook. Like, the people aspect here is really important. We talked about data engineers, what they like to do, what they don't like. That's actually really important. If there's something that's going to impact the company's performance, it's not in any KPI, it's not in anywhere, but that actually has a lot of impact of how productive you are as a person, and it's a lot of things. So yeah, in terms of audit, again, it's the same concept. If you can build in your security services and compliance services into the entire data platform versus I have one process for SQL, one process for Snowflake, you need to consume that as a service. If you need to go into Snowflake and now start pulling audit logs and start parsing them or what have you, that's just not a smart thing to do. Get a tool that does that. That's the only way to do it. It doesn't have any value for the company. You just need to check the box. And so, for example, in our platform, we have full auditing for all the queries. Who's accessing PII, how much they pulled. You have full auditing of the permission approval process, so who you can prove that you have a process for approving access. You can show the security controls. All that is already built into the system. So you just go in, you click a button, you generate the report, you send it to your compliance team, and you're done. It's just not really productive doing it any other way, to be honest.
No, and I think it's the landscape complexity is what drives the time and effort required to actually do one of those audits. And if you're able to have a simplified architecture where it's a single place to do this particular audit, and you can evidence that the only way of getting in there is via the route you specified, it's going to make it quite a seamless activity. And you won't. Well, I haven't got any hair to pull out now, but you won't be pulling your hair out when you go and get another compliance audit. So that's great. I'm going to go flip back to we talked about iceberg and Delta Lake tables and things like that, and so data catalogs. And now we've got to work out when someone mentions data catalog, which one you're referring to. Are you referring to the ones we were traditional ones like Elation and Calibras, where it's about cataloging the attribution, the business logic, the ownership of the particular data. The new data catalogs, Polaris and equivalents. I think Unity catalog, I think is Databricks one. So with the rise of these catalogs that are now there to support the complexity of having a lakehouse architecture where you've got stuff outside of your platform as well. How do you see? Do you see that's where maybe the data owners need to be allocated now? Is that going to have an effect on how we do security now?
So I think, in short, yes, and I think it's following the same footsteps of other aspects of the data platform. It's really interesting. What I think data catalogs are not missing. They're not really missing more features to be more adopted, more effective. What they're missing is being part of the data platform, an integrated part of the data platform versus something external. And I think Polaris, Unity, even Purview is not there yet, but in terms of how they think about Purview, that's how they think about stuff. So, like, in order, that for a company to adopt a data catalog, and I don't want to name names, they're undergoing like a very long process, manual process of doing that, which is really, when you think about it, redundant. You're taking information that's already there. You're reformatting it and putting it in another tool. It's okay if you have a small data set. If you're a true enterprise with a really significant data operation, that just that's a showstopper for you being successful there. So and what I'm happy about Polaris and Unity and Preview is that a lot of that manual work is now redundant. It's already integrated. So if you think about, again, Fabric, if you add like a data set to your data lake, it's like immediately already available on Purview. It's already available in Power BI to generate dashboards. It's already available. They have this middle layer where you can apply some level of controls and manipulations on the data. That in my eyes is amazing. And security has to be the same. So far, in terms of like our security approach, was to try to get as close as possible to that experience by integrating Satori with the data catalog. So like in Calibra, if you set up a data product or a data set, I don't remember how to call it, I think maybe a data set, within that Calibra data set, you can click a button and get access through the workflow that Satori provides. So trying to, and we populate these data sets and we provide the tags. So everything, you don't need to recreate configuration. That is really, really good. And companies have adopted that very successfully. I think now it's time for the next step, as you have these, again, Polaris, Unity, regardless, they're doing other stuff as well. It's not just obviously for security what they're doing, but being able to take companies from a place they're trying to, synchronize multiple areas of the data platform to something that's already synchronized and working well together, and having security, again, this universal layer. You need to support all the technologies. You need to be able to abstract the policies to the point you can define them across any kind of use case, which we've already done. Once you have that and you have your data catalog integrated, that really improves security. I think we're just in the beginning. I think there are different opinions on data catalogs. We've seen companies really with diverse opinions from like, my data catalog is like one place I'm going to have everything there, to, hey, I'm going to have 5 data catalogs. So there's no standard yet, but I think we're headed towards the right direction.
So, and the next slide I just made a second ago is that we got the rise of the multiple compute engines now. So, and I have two minds on how many compute engines you really need to have, and having flexibility. Yeah, there's some benefits from that. But I think people need to not underestimate the complexity of, okay, I'm going to this lakehouse architecture to have these multiple compute engines for maybe it's to not be sticky to a particular vendor, or maybe it's a cost thing. Okay, it's cheaper to run it on this, so it's a use case, but a use case based decision of what compute engine you use. It could be even that you've got an on-premise compute engine, so it's like so. But you have to make sure the security is available for each one of your compute engines, and to go and based on those technologies to bake in that security to each one of those and keep them in sync is no small activity. So using your product or your approach would solve that problem. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen this very evident in actually in AI. So running LLMs is can be expensive, and the the differences between different models for specific use cases, we're talking about like tens and hundreds of percentage difference in cost. So companies do look at that. That's a discussion we've seen happening, and definitely the cost of a specific model on a specific platform with a specific compute engine have been a significant driving force in their decision on how to operate. And generally, they want to use they'll use the best, cheapest one they can. I think it's a good thing. The way I interpret these discussions with customers is not that, hey, we're trying to over optimize or they're thinking about real production use cases. They're thinking about their P&L, how much is going to cost them to run the service. So they're thinking long term. So for me, it's actually a good indication. I don't see it as just a techie discussion. I see it as, hey, the business here is serious about this project. So actually, I want to be involved in this project because it's serious. The funding around it, thinking about the money. But yeah, from a security perspective, it's really important that, as I said earlier, you don't get your security policy and security implementation tied too much to your data platform implementation from a technical perspective. Like from a security perspective, PII is PII. It can be in a file, it could be in a table, it could be somewhere else. If you're now, you have security for PII in files and security for PII in tables, and these are two different solutions, you're in a really, really bad place. You're looking for, you're building an architecture that is bound to just get worse with time. So definitely you should look for, that's how we built our product, again, to abstract that technical complexity. But I recommend, regardless of Satori, when you think about security for your data platform, try to abstract, because, today it's Snowflake and Databricks, tomorrow it's Fabric, and then there's something else, and there's another compute engine, and NVIDIA is going to come with something else that AWS is going to adopt, and you're never going to finish with it until it stabilizes. But the data platform, data technologies, we're looking at, at least 10 years now of innovation, take technology that can survive those 10 years.
So yeah, platforms come and go, but security always stays, I suppose, isn't it? So
yeah, that's the fun of being in security domain. It's kind of always the same, but it always evolves because it's it's jumping between new domains.
Cool. So I'm looking back at my notes here. Tokenization and encryption. So something that I know we've had fun in the past when we worked. So how are you see? So with the requirement for certain companies maybe to have tokenizations easier, I suppose, but encryption, are you seeing that as a requirement for many customers to actually have two-way encryption as well?
I think tokenization and encryption, like any other technology, went through like the hype cycle. The Gartner hype cycle, where it goes up, and there's the slope of disillusion, and then the plateau, whatever, productivity, I don't remember how to call it. So yeah, I think tokenization, encryption, we're like, hey, we're going to solve everything with like, hey, it's encrypted, so nobody can steal it, and it's tokenized, so nobody can steal it. And then quickly they realized that either A, that's not true, and B, if you're going to encrypt and tokenize all your data, you're not going to be able to use it. It's not just the hackers; it's going to be extremely hard for you to be effective. So then, it went through this slope of dissolution of, okay, which use cases are really good and have a good fit for tokenization and encryption, and what it is. So encryption now, as I see it, there's specific use cases where you would do like very sophisticated, what we call application level encryption, meaning until the data is really encrypted until it reaches the client browser, whatever application. These are really, really unique use cases. Generally, encryption is just, Snowflake has encryption. All their disks is an encryption. If you go into Snowflake data center and you steal a disk, you're not going to get anything out. That's, for most of the companies, when they talk about encryption, that's like hard drive encryption, which they have
transparent database encryption, as it used to be known in Oracle and the other ones.
Exactly. So that's most of the encryption is there. There's some application of encryption, but really these are unique. You can't do it large scale because you need to decrypt the data, which is extremely hard in its scale. And then tokenization is kind of the same. It's now reduced to very specific data elements in very specific use cases. All are good, but what I'm trying to say is encryption, tokenization it's not equivalent to security. Security is many things.
Yep.
Eventually, you need to understand what your risks are, what are your exposures, what's your appetite for that risk, how you solve it. There's access, there's encryption, there's all sorts of ways you need to do it. The idea is you need a platform so you can really address the security need and not just address the technical use case, which is limited.
It's the best security in the world that locks up everything, but then not be able to use it for anything at all. And it's always that balance when you're talking to the CISO team or the security team, saying, if you read those policies verbatim, yeah, great, but we've got to shut business up and go home because we can't actually do our jobs now. So I think having that.
Yeah, but I do think that the CISOs, especially the tenured one, have matured. They understand. They can. If anything, they're actually, they're more interested in the practicality of the solutions they're getting. So there's always this ability to execute on a project is a big consideration from security team because they rely on the engineering teams. They can't do really anything themselves. From an implementation perspective on the tech platform because they don't own it. So actually the practicality of the solution, that's why we have winning with data is it's not don't lose control and win with data. It's actually win with data. That's what the organization wants. If we can achieve that and not lose control, then we're going to win.
Yeah, exactly. And do you think the CISO teams, have become more cloud savvy now? Do you think so? Before, when maybe a few years ago, working with them, they would just use the on-premise solutions, and it was a different world. And they've now adapted their learnings to the cloud and become a little bit more cloud friendly.
Yes, and I'll tell you why this has happened. So cloud has been a mess. Cloud security has been a mess for many years because you had all sorts of companies trying to copy on-prem technologies into the cloud, like agents and stuff. That's really bad. Then came companies like Orca and Wiz that really reinvented cloud security, and you really now have one platform that covers like 80% of the problem. Now, and information, like everything you're going to throw at the security team, they have a model for it for security. Okay, it fits into my my SOC, how to do threat management, vulnerability management, all that. I have that figured with a Wiz or an Orca. So actually, you can go for the cloud. I'm good for that. I don't need to put in extra work. I don't see any extra risks. So yes, so it's it's a bigger, broader story than just data. I think actually data needs to get there as well, so they can get comfortable with data. That's what we're trying to do. But generally, yes, security teams have become more comfortable because the tools have matured to allow that.
I saw an interesting article about Microsoft Copilot. I think was that people could ask it questions, and they're able to like get access to the CEO's emails and maybe HR things they weren't allowed to. So, and a bit more of interest from myself. How are we going to control? How are we going to add that security layer to generative AI capabilities going forward?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I think. So I think there's when you think about securing that kind of channel, it's not just one thing. You can't really just do one thing and expect it to address that. So I think there's stuff that needs to happen in the models themselves. Anything around the context of the conversation. Never would an external security solution be able to achieve the same result. You want to have within your model like your security conscious part that's going to address these concerns. But you have like I try to dummy it down, really, you have a user, it's an employee or an external interacting with a company asset that can share data. That's a data exchange. You still want to have a policy. If you said these types of users cannot see PII and PII needs, you have to have the same team. That's actually we didn't anticipate this when we kind of built and invented this proxy architecture. But when LLMs came out and customers started asking us, hey, can you apply to LLMs? We said, this is perfect. You don't have native capabilities on these LLMs. Just put in the proxy, which we've done, and then you get the same policy. So you're getting like the same data security policy for your LLMs with really zero investment from your side. It's the same policies, the same technology. So that has been amazing. So I think there's addressing the AI security problem is multi-dimensional and not just one thing.
Yeah. So I think it probably leads me on to the closing sort of like maybe the thing to wrap up on, which is, which we may have touched on just there, is what's the future? What's next? So what do you see the big takes from 2025?
Yeah, for sure. So I feel fortunate. I don't know about yourself. I feel fortunate being in this field because all the innovation is there. It's just amazing. The next big thing is building spaceships. In my there's just so much happening with data. So I'm also being humble here and say I'm not sure I can predict everything. But what I can say is what I'm seeing with our customers. So the whole discussion about the theoretical aspects of data mesh and data fabric and data products have really bubbled up to the business level. So they moved from technically this sounds cool to actually the business, for different reasons, wants the company to look at things this way. They don't want to build desperate architectures. They want to have they understand the business value of having like a one data platform that does everything, and it also saves a lot of money if you have your data in the data lake. So that's a big from a security perspective, the demand is going to be the same. If you're now going towards that, you want to have all your technologies aligned. I think companies will consume as much as they can from the cloud vendors themselves. I think that will happen. You will see larger contracts with the cloud vendors trying to consume as many of the services they can. I think security has always been something you consume from a third party. The cloud vendors actually sell most of the security business is coming from third party. That's why we partner with Microsoft, AWS, GCP. And I think the third thing I would say is just maybe two things. One is what I'm seeing in the market is access is going to be a big piece of it. So everything boils down eventually to, can a person actually do their job and access that data? If we can make that happen, we're going to be successful. So that's where we're investing. And number two is, it's kind of obvious, but AI. LLMs are, I just been on another webinar a couple of weeks ago, and we're talking about how, last year or the last 12 months was, hey, we're going to experiment with AI, we're going to try to find the right use case for the company, we're going to do something small scale. Now companies are moving from the POC stage to production. That's a different game now. From a cost perspective, from an operational perspective, and security is going to now move from, hey, it's just internal 5 people from the engineering team to, hey, we're going to open a service for our customers. That is scary. So I think around that, we're going to see a lot of things as well.
Yeah, so it's basically that speed to value will be increased, and I think the comment you made there about businesses being more savvy now. I think if the AI hype cycle, if it gives us anything, it really has made the C-level to understand more about data quality, understand more about data, or to make be more focused on it as well. So yeah, I think there's good that's come out of that, and I think each era we learn something. Well, we learn something and make other mistakes, but then as long as we keep looking back and try not to make the same mistake each hop of evolution, I think we'll be in a very good place. Cool. Well, I think that'll be a good place to probably wrap it up on. If people want to find out more about Satori, how can they get hold of you and find out more?
Yeah, pretty easy. Either go on our website, satoricyber.com, or go on our LinkedIn and reach out. We'll be happy to chat.
Cool, brilliant, Eldad. Well, so thanks again for being on the show. As I say, I always love these chats and to get your insight of where you see things are going, and make sure I've got my eye in the right place as well. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for the audience. We didn't get any questions today. I'm checking. We were live, but maybe everyone, if you have any questions, get them in very quickly. We'll let that go. So Eldad, we'll call it a wrap then. And for me, next week's show, I have to move it. Unfortunately, I can't do Monday because I'm traveling, but I think we've got Ben Rojan on the Tuesday if he can make it. So that'll be that. And then, then it's, off for Christmas. So
off for Christmas.
Yeah. Well, Eldad, thanks again. We'll have a chat a little bit after this anyway, though, so you can hang on. But for the audience, we'll see you all later. And thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.